what it was at the beginning of the season. We sat down with parents and players and said, this is what we're doing. This is what it's about. If this doesn't work for you, I'm okay with that. I can put you somewhere else. But this is about finishing the season better than we started across a mutually agreed upon set of development criteria. That's it. And we want your son or daughter to come back and continue to play this sport year after year after year.
Hey listeners, thanks for joining us. This is episode number 7 of Play On, Why Street Soccer. I'm John Henderson, co-host with Neal, our nation's leading advocate for street soccer. Today we have an amazing guest. His list of accomplishments is gigantic, so I'll just say they're in business, charity, as well as athletics. Recently, he co-founded a company called FSQ Consulting and delivered an amazing TED Talk in February 2022. Thanks for joining us, Matt Young.
Thanks both for having me. It's a pleasure.
Matt, it's a real pleasure for us because, boy, that TED Talk was outstanding. And we'll get to that in a minute. I want to get to how we got there in the first place. But I'm looking over your list of accomplishments and what you've done in the last number of years. And the only thing that I can use to sum it up is overachiever. Man, you have done a lot of stuff. So let's go there because that's just wildly fascinating. How did we get here? Talk about where this all started.
Yeah, I think if we go right back to the beginning, sport was really an integral part of my life. I came from a very small town in Northern Ontario, from a dysfunctional family setting. So really sport offered me, without me knowing it at the time, a lot of the things that we now advocate in terms of character development, the social emotional connection, building up my confidence and self-esteem. So I played everything. You name it, I played it. I was there before the school bell rang, and I left after the janitors said, get out of the gym. And that's where it all started.
Okay, there you go. You piqued my interest. Because we're all about just play sports, and it sounds like that's what you did. And so how long did that go on before you found yourself in any type of structured or organized or heavily coached activity?
Yeah, well, I'm old, so it basically, once the season was done, you're done. So when football is done, you're preparing for basketball. When basketball is done, you're preparing for track and field. If that was done, you're preparing for soccer. So there wasn't an option at that time when I was growing up to be involved all year round because it hadn't quite matured or digressed into the business of sport, which it is right now.
So were there opportunities for you where you grew up to play, unstructured pickup just with your friends, or were these sports organized at an early age and you jumped in as a way of moving from some of the more dysfunctional stuff you were experiencing at home?
Yeah, they were largely unorganized. Of course, there was school sports, which, I think we've gotten away from as we've developed into kind of a pay-to-play academy style in communities. And listen, I was from a small town in a rural community. So basically, if you wanted to go to your friend's house, you're on a bike. If you want, there was 4 channels on the TV station. So that wasn't an option for kids watching, the Beachcombers or whatever was on the TV there. So it was a different time, and it was a simpler time. It was an easier time, and it was a time that lent itself much more to being healthy, active, and outside. We weren't beholden to our devices and our cell phones that came much later.
And so then, how does that land you in kinetics?
Yeah, so I had a great physical education teacher, and it was back in the day where you could actually hold kids accountable, and he held me accountable. And it was a real pivotal moment of my life. So thanks for asking about that. So, one day I had done some buffoonery, and he called me to the front of the class and essentially undressed me and just basically said, who in here would love to go to that next level and compete at the university level in any sport? And everyone put their hand up. And I thought, this is great. I was going to be getting big accolades here because I was on my way. And he said, yeah, well, look at this guy. He's got all the talent in the world, and he's pissing it away. He's choosing to go, down this path when he could go down that path. How does that make you feel? All you feel who wanted to go down that path. And it was really awkward, but he had gained my trust as somebody who believed in me. So, I took what he said to heart, and then the next day began systematically changing habits and getting rid of some of the negative things and really putting myself in a position to succeed at that next level, which was college. I was a dual sport athlete in college. I ran track and field and I played American football. And I did that for 5 years. And it was just a fantastic experience. And when I got into school, I really wanted to be him. So I really wanted to have that same impact on kids that he had on me. But then again, at that time, it was a different structure in the school system. It was a different, you couldn't, unions prevented you from coaching as well as teaching. And it was a box. The education system was a box and you had to operate inside that box. And I thought that's probably not where I'm best suited. So we got into the entrepreneurial private business and we got into the personal training business. We looked at the personal training business and said, it's such a low barrier to entry. And basically it's all about the guy or the gal with the six pack and who looks good. And we said, there's a real opportunity here to flip this script and make it all about the consumer. So we're going to ask consumers two things: what they've always wanted to do, but never thought they could accomplish from a physical fitness perspective, or what they'd always wanted to do, but they've never prioritized in terms of time. And then we would use the gym as a conduit to that. So someone would come and say, well, I used to run and I haven't been able to run because I'm injured. We would rehabilitate their injury and we would start running. And if they accomplished a 5K, they would come back and inevitably ask us, do you think I could do a 10K? Yep. Do you think I could do a half marathon? And I mean, we took 75 people every year for 10 years to Machu Picchu. We took 125 people to the Grand Canyon, hiked up and down it. We ran across the Sahara Desert with a group of people. If you came in and said you wanted to do something, we put the wheels in motion, got 10 other people, got a training coach to travel for free, and basically we were on it. So Iceland, Great Wall of China, rode across Australia, rode across Canada, raised money for charity. So really, it wasn't a job. It seemed like an extension for us of being able to see the world and help people, achieve what they wanted to achieve. So we hear a lot about transformational coaching now. We started doing that in 1997 without it being transformational. And it wasn't just myself, obviously. Anything that I've achieved has come hand in hand with a bunch of great people that we had. We're fortunate enough to have work with us. So that's kind of in a Cole's notes where it came from. And then we transitioned when we had kids from business into sport, showed up at the sport fields and said, oh, well, this is the exact same nonsense we saw in the personal training industry. It's all about the celebrity parent with their celebrity athlete and the celebrity club. And basically there's very little value being offered back to any of those stakeholders because it's all about the standings, the score, and the schedule, which tell us zero about development.
So that's fascinating. So the personal training for the adults seemed to very much do what we've been advocating, and that is you're focusing on the person and not necessarily the outcome of the result, right? So you need to find out who that person is, what are their issues physically, emotionally, and we need to get past the barrier and we help them get from point A to point B. And then you saw this in the youth, that we were focusing too much on the outcomes and you were going after the child. So what does that look like in terms of personal training for children? Because, the hair on the back of my neck goes up when I hear about personal trainers for 5-year-olds, right? I mean, how many 5-year-olds around the rest of the world had personal trainers or coaches teaching them how to be professional athletes, and using the metaphor of soccer, of course, in the US, we teach 3-year-olds how to be professional athletes, and we've got 70% drop off by the age 13 because it's just not fun, overcoached, overstructured. And I think that is what we've lost. We've lost the idea to understand how we develop a person first and an athlete after that. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, no question about that. So for us, it was basically, first of all, we never trained kids at that age because we said the same thing that you would probably say, which is your kid should be out playing in the backyard. You don't need to spend any money on that. But when we got to the sports section, what we said was we're going to set up some development characteristics at the beginning of the season, depending on the sport. Let's take baseball. So can they throw, catch, just really the fundamental skills at that age, and we said, here's where they are, red, yellow, green, can't do it yet, kind of on their way or can do it. And we gave an evaluation at the beginning of the season. We reevaluated the mid-season, and then we gave them a kind of a finish at the end of the season, because really, in essence, that's what it's all about, is development. Coaching is the business of development, and it's the business of helping others develop. And that includes players, parents, administrators, other coaches, etc. So where we experienced going into community settings and having neighbor against neighbor and there was all this drama. What we said is, no, we're competing against other neighborhoods and other districts. We need to be together here. So let's get the coaches together. Let's learn off of each other. Let's have one individual practice with one-on-one coach, but then let's have one practice where every coach is there with all of the kids so that we can learn with each other. So those are just some of the ways where we would say, listen, this is about development. It's about a bigger picture. And then with that came the parent engagement. I don't like to say parent education. Nobody likes to be educated. So really engaging the parents on how to be the best supporter of this journey. Now, listen, there's going to be crazy parents that have ideas of their own, but by and large, most parents just don't know what they don't know. And we take that for granted in not taking the time to engage them, bringing them into that process and give them the tools and resources that they need. And we write them off. 24-hour rule, don't talk to me. You don't know what you're doing. I'm the coach. And that just creates, contentiousness right out of the gates. Parents could ask me anything they wanted at any time they wanted. I didn't care because I was confident enough to explain what it was. At the beginning of the season, we sat down with parents and players and said, this is what we're doing. This is what it's about. If this doesn't work for you, I'm okay with that. I can put you somewhere else. But this is about finishing the season better than we started across a mutually agreed upon set of development criteria. That's it. And we want your son or daughter to come back and continue to play this sport year after year after year when we're gone. And when we had that philosophy, it's probably no surprise or no secret, we always did well because it was about the individual process and journey. And things usually clicked, and we did end up winning championships. We did it, and it wasn't because we stacked the team or had the best. People won because you can facilitate way more victories when you're focused on the individuals that are playing rather than the bigger picture.
Okay, wow. You just wrapped up so many concepts into that one little response, not the least of which is how easy it is for it to attack parents. Certainly the parents that are pacing up and down the sideline, yelling at the referees, yelling at the kids on the way home, you should have done better. You should have tried harder when they're 4 years old, 5 years old, 8 years old. I don't care if it's when they're 15 years old. That's not what a kid wants to hear from their parent. And so we've got the parental issues, we've got the need to win issues, we've got the overcoaching issues, but we've also got a coach who has a great filter, and it sounds like that's what you had. You had a great filter in taking in and accepting that there are different types of parents out there, and there are different types of goals out there, and there are different types of outcomes, but all of them have to start with the kid. So can't commend you enough for having that style of filter, and you see it. You absolutely know it when you see it. A good coach will always have that filter, set the boundaries from the early stage. And one of my favorite lines is, I hope this works for you. And if it doesn't, there's someplace else to go. The problem that we're seeing, though, and we're bouncing a little bit, and I'll get us back on track here in a minute, is that there are drivers to make it such that coaches don't do what you're doing, right? You've taken such great ownership of that. You've had your successes, and you've created some business out of it. You've gone to school and studied it, and you've, of course, experienced it, which I think is a huge piece of it, right? Eddie Henderson was just recently on one of our podcasts, and he was U17, U19, U20 men's national team football player, soccer player here in the state. For the first 12 years of his life, he played in the alley behind his house in Seattle, right? Wasn't even coached. Right. So we get that here, of course, and love that you've adopted that. And again, we'll talk about the TED Talk in a second. But, how do we settle this rising tide? Right. We have good parents, even as you've identified, who fall prey to this model, this pay to play model, this more let's focus on the outcome model. Let's focus on the money model. If little Johnny's doing it, then my little Susie's got to do it too. Right. So we've got this rising tide of even the good folks getting all caught up in this thing. And you're obviously part of a movement where that's not happening. Am I moving now towards the concept of, physical literacy that you talk about, or is that more of a very specific design with respect to the individual type training that you do?
Yeah, two great questions. So I think the physical literacy is basically, an understanding, having the competence, confidence, and knowledge to be healthy and active for life. I think we're losing that, yes, because we're marginalizing physical education. We got Xanax or whatever, Adderall. We can get up and down now without having to be physically active. We can lose weight by taking a pill. We've got phones that are taking up a lot of our time and chewing into our time. So socially, unfortunately, we're innately designed to move. Socially, we're being designed to sit still, and that's going to manifest itself in mental health issues that are going to be well beyond the scope of what we're seeing right now. So yes, the physical literacy needs to come back, whether people like it or not. We are a species that is designed to move. Going over to the parents, I don't have the answer. I don't know when it switched, and I'm not really sure why it switched, but you are right. In keeping up with the Joneses, that seems to be much of the motivation for what we do in our driver. And we always talk about change, and change happens by design or by disaster. It's very rare you'll get a parent that drives their kids into quitting a sport that who will then come out afterwards and say, I did that wrong. And it cost me. It cost me a relationship with my son or daughter or my kid. It cost me relationships with other people in the community. It cost me time and energy and anxiety. And it was all unnecessary, because I'm not sure why we feel we have to be so involved and an agent for our children at such a young age in sport, when really they're telling us, the kids tell us the reasons that they play, and winning is far, far down on that list. So I'm not sure if I had the answer to that, and I'd love to see a study done by a psychologist that really studies parents and gets to the root of what this is all about, because it's definitely not about the kids. It's definitely about the parents. And if we had some instruction or presentations around that, I think that would help. But listen, primary human motivators, fear and greed, FOMO and ego. So no one wants to miss out, and nobody wants to see their little gem darling not make the A1 team the first year that they try out. And so it's all or nothing. So, you can't fix that. And savvy entrepreneurs, shady entrepreneurs, snake oil salespeople will exploit that. And we've exploited it. I think it's $19 billion in the United States and $8 billion in Canada, the size of the industry. There's no CEO, there's no regulation, there's no minister of sport in the United States. Look at the size of sports in the United States. I mean, you've got free market capitalism that's basically cannibalizing the sports system. And what's unfortunate about that is it's not just a sports system, and people will say, well, my kids don't play sports, and that's why I don't let them play sports. Those ramifications come in truancy, and where are all these young people investing their time if it's not positively in a positive outlet, whether that is music or sports or arts or where is that time being invested? It's being invested in digital technology, digital junk food, and we're getting sick off of it.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that we can't just, talk about it and teach it, right? You have, we're here in this podcast and we are exploring. We're exploring, what everyone's doing, because we want to see the different ways that people are accomplishing what they're trying to accomplish and do these good things that you're doing and others on the show have done. And Linda Flanagan was just recently here as well. You know her and her
Awesome.
book. Yeah, she's amazing. And 27 some odd pages of reference notes with all the research that she cites and the people that she cites. And it was stunning to just browse that part of the book alone. But she does touch on, the parents, and yes, there's the money issue, and you can't mess with parenting, right? You can't tell people you're doing a bad job parenting. Just never happens. And I do think that, though, we do need to see where the drivers are, and the drivers can be a few bad parents, right? Yeah. And when you're living vicariously through your kid, and when you're trying to ensure that your kid's going to get a scholarship, whether for need or for posterity's sake, or whether you're trying to get that great shoe deal, you are going to drive your kid in the direction that has been manufactured. And we're really lucky enough in the sport of soccer, because it's such a metaphor as the true world sport, right? So we can compare what we're doing here in the United States to other countries, right, more so in soccer than anywhere else, because of that intense, not only the intense competition among countries, but also we didn't invent the sport. We're really good at sports we invent and we put a lot of money into, but we thought we could do the same thing with soccer, put a lot of money into it. And look, we just got knocked out again around 16. And right, while people were really excited about the progress that we had to get us there, because we couldn't even make the World Cup in the last 2 rounds, I think it's actually more of a setback to then recognize that all this progress that you thought was going to all of a sudden make us superstars really only made us mediocre.
Right. It's a low bar.
Yeah, it's a low bar, absolutely. And again, there's so many things that get the hair on the back of my head going, but one of them is watching the over structuring and the over coaching of these kids playing soccer. And to your point, we got to let them play, not necessarily as a way of letting them be out and be wild, but more so as a way of actually developing the individual. Because this is where they learn all sorts of social and life skills when they're out in the street soccer pitch playing five-a-side with their friends from the end of the block. Eddie doesn't lack any independence. Eddie Henderson, he doesn't lack any academic prowess. He doesn't lack anything. The guy's an incredible success story and never coached until he was 12. We had Joanna Lohman on our show. She's a women's national team player, professional team player. She wasn't coached soccer until she was 12. Junior in high school. She was a junior in high school before she was coached. So, hey, I am with you on this. We got to develop the kid, and there's some fascinating ways you're going about doing that, but I can't let go the idea of your TED Talk, because your TED Talk hits it so well. I had such a great presentation, and we're going to make sure that we put a link to that in the podcast episode here. But tell us about that. How did you get that opportunity to do that? Because that's a great platform for you.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend that anyone who wants to get a message out use that platform of the TEDx Talks. They're very good. That's my plug for TEDx Talks, because it has done a lot for us in that message, that skill globally. We hear from people all around the world every week. So we got the opportunity to speak about it and ask. We were asked, "What do you want to talk about?" And I said, "I know exactly what we want to talk about. And we're going to address the issues that nobody's really addressing head on, and we're going to give some real simple solutions. Because as you've talked on your podcast, there's a variety of different ways you can go. But I think the three main calls to action: let the kids be kids, see something, say something, and restructure the industry, are really what we need to do if we're serious about gaining any sort of control over this fractured system that we have. So, just using the statistics, just like Linda used, they're all there. But no one thinks it's my kid. If we walked into a room of 100 parents and said only 1% of this group is going to get to that next level of sport, who do you think it is? I'm pretty sure over 75 to 85% of the parents would raise their hand and say it's me and my kid. So, despite the statistics, we continue to flog it, and we continue to do it. And, it comes from a place of good intentions, but misappropriation of love, as our friend Heath talks about it from a better way. It is really a misappropriation of love, trying to make those things happen for the kids. You just need to let those kids be kids. And the see something, say something. I'm not sure if you're following the news, but just the amount of people that are coming forward, athletes that are coming forward and talking about the abuse and the systemic abuse in the sports system, especially in Canada right now, is ridiculous. And I've been on teams where I've watched it, and I myself have not said anything, and I've watched what's happened to kids that aren't my own kids, and I've spoken up, which is a little bit more powerful because it's not my own kid. I'm not complaining about what's happening to my kid. I yell at my kid. So for my kid going to a situation where he may be challenged or being yelled at, it's not a big drop or gap in expectation. But for a lot of kids, that's not the way it goes. And as coaches, we have to realize who has the resilience, who can take that, who responds to that, and who doesn't respond to that. And if you can't figure that out pretty quickly, you probably shouldn't be coaching. In the last restructure of the industry, again, to the point of, $28 billion industry with no CEO. You look at some of the things that Australia did, in consolidating their cycling federation from, I think it was 38 boards, 12 CEOs and directors to one board, one CEO and 11 directors. That's giving the sport legs. That's money and investment that can go back into the whole sport system. Instead of what we're seeing is in Canada, we've got national sport organizations, provincial sport organizations, local sport organizations, each with their own separate boards, separate ideas. There's no alignment. And when you talk about, US soccer, that's the problem, is that there's no alignment down the development pathway. You've got, in those other countries, it's very clear. This is the pathway, and this is what it is, because we don't have all of the rest of the distractions and interference from everybody. So the TED Talk was a great opportunity to really get that message out. It happened to be timed really well with what was happening in the sport industry. We got lucky. But now it's not about just giving the TED talk. It's about encouraging people to do and take action, and that's always where the rubber hits the road.
Well, and do and take action doesn't mean yelling at your kid, right? So you've earned the respect to be able to yell at your kid. And we call that every now and then you need a swift kick in the ass. Mm-hmm. And if you've earned the respect of the kid, then that swift kick in the ass will be properly received by that kid as being constructive and not abusive. And yes, we're following the news very, very closely, and the abuse is pervasive, and it's horrible that it's happening at professional levels too, that people sign up to be part of those programs where they know they're walking into that locker room and that's what's going to happen. But it's of course even more disturbing at the youth levels when we see what's going on with just young girls and boys being abused by their coaches, which underscores the respect concept, because you don't become a great coach just because you have an impressive resume. And that's a great transition for you, because here we are learning about you and learning about your philosophies and how you do these things. And we haven't gotten really to your resume yet, because, oh my gosh, I've got 3 pages printed out here of the things that you've done, including a Guinness world record for fastest bike relay across Canada 2007. Man, you have done it. I mean, you're out there living it. And but I will say, a lot of this stuff, climbing Kilimanjaro and multi-day races and marathons and Ironmans. Oh my gosh, 2-time Ironman finisher. But then, the one that really strikes me, as I'm sure the listeners will imagine, is $6 million raised for charity. You do a lot of this stuff because you care. And that's what makes a great coach. People who care, and that doesn't mean you don't yell. It doesn't mean that you have to follow one specific training model. But we need to start with the people, right? The coach is a person too, just like the kid's a person. If we're going to develop the kid as a person first before an athlete, we got to develop the coach as a person too, and give them the tools to care enough. Hopefully they come in at least caring enough that they're willing to see this, and we can change this rising tide. But yeah,
I got to jump in there, Neal, because man, that's a good point. And I've been on a lot of podcasts. Nobody's ever mentioned that, but the self-care for coaches is massive. And the reason why I did and chose to do something different every year is because if we're not continuing to challenge, if I'm not continuing to learn myself and put myself out there, then how can I possibly ask that of somebody else? When I was training people in our personal training business to do an Ironman, I needed to do an Ironman. And listen, trust me, I wasn't top 10. I mean, I walked that whole thing and said I'd never do it again, and ended up doing it again and did worse the second time. But it's in the failures, and I think that's a critical point. If we're not putting ourselves out there and failing, then how do we possibly know what success looks like? How do we possibly know what that journey looks like, and where to support and where not to support, where to add value? It's firm but fair. So we talk about what is great coaching. Great coaching is firm but fair. I'm here, and as long as that's established at the outset, and people always say, oh, well, how can you do that with 5-year-olds? Trust me, 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds, they're not stupid. They know what's going on. We do not give kids and athletes enough credit. I got a text, 2 months ago from a kid everyone had written off, including myself, until I challenged myself to find a way to connect with this pain in the ass kid who showed up for football and was basically, had all the gloves and bells and whistles and eyeliner and all that stuff, and was just terrible because he didn't want to work on his game. So we finally found a way to connect. That was my job, was to find a way to connect with him, because we didn't. And he just shot me a text to say, hey, Coach, listen, I just wanted to let you know I'm starting in my 4th year of college this weekend, and I have you to thank, because you were straight with me, and I just want to say thanks. And it's a kid we kept in touch with. I asked how he was doing year after year. I want to quit. No, don't quit. He loved the game. He just wasn't that good at it because he wasn't investing enough time to practice in it. So yeah, I transitioned away from, what is great coaching. But if you're not doing that as a coach, when people say development, everyone thinks it's development for somebody else. If you're not developing as a coach, you can't help. You will not be as impactful in helping someone else develop.
Man, so true. How many coaches are prima donnas coming in, throwing their resume around at top levels that they played at that particular sport? And we've seen time and time again that the best players do not make the best coaches. Sometimes the worst players make the best coaches. Sometimes the worst triathlete makes the best triathlete trainer. Because your point is so spot on. You need to experience all of it. You can't experience just the highs and the lows, or just the highs to understand what it takes to be a champion within yourself, right? So, my favorite moments are when I drop to the ground and I'm bowing at an individual who just crossed their own personal bar, right?
Yeah.
They set that bar and you go, and I started taking pictures of their faces because you need to capture what that feels like, right?
Powerful.
Right. And you don't see that in some coaching states where the coach is talking and talking and talking. They're just sitting around. They're not even given a chance to actually show that, right? If they don't have the outcome of winning the game, then, everybody goes down. And absolutely brutal. There's a great metaphor. I was coaching teenage girls and soccer, and there were two girls that just loved to go. And I'm a firm believer that girls are more social creatures than boys are, and they need their time. They need their time to come together and commune. And so I always gave them the first 10 minutes of practice. I didn't say a thing except hello, how was your day? And they'd come on the field and they'd get going, and we would start practice. And then 10 minutes in, I get these two girls that just had unfinished business, and they were still talking. And I just stopped. I put my hands up. I said, I looked at them in front of everybody else. I said, girls, it's obvious you have unfinished business. Just do me a favor. Take it over there and finish it off my field. And when you're ready, come on back. And without missing a beat, they walked off the field and they continued their conversation, and they came back on. They played like there was no tomorrow. I mean, you have to respect the players, and the players then can respect the coaches back, and they'll do anything for you at that point. That's at least what I find in great coaching.
Yeah. Hey, listen, and we say it all the time. Great coaching is not the mark of aggregating superior talent and kicking the crap out of inferior competition. Great coaching is not convincing players to believe in your system. Great coaching is helping people believe in themselves, because when you are successful at doing that, they'll move mountains for you. And more importantly, it's not about you. They will rise to levels they did not think they even had in themselves. So I think that's one of the things it's definitely one of the things that we, when we're in a conference and we have 100 people, we'll say, think about the coach that had the most profound impact on your life. What was it? And then they'll write it down on a sticky note, and we'll say, okay, if it was, did they make you run faster, kick harder, or anything technical, tactical, put it over here. And if it was anything else, they helped me believe in myself, they gave me confidence, put it over here. And if we're with 100 people, there's 98 sticky notes on that one side and one on the other side. But what does every single conference talk about? Technical, tactical, technical, tactical. Here's the latest shoe. Go outside and look at the providers, all about swim faster, jump higher, all that stuff. We don't ever get into the soft skills because, quite frankly, I think that scares a lot of us. It's uncharted territory.
Yeah, well, that's, U.S. Soccer does that incorrectly as well. They have the 4 pillars of training, and the 4 pillars are technical, tactical, physical, and then psychological. And to me, that's all wrong. It's psychological, and then everything else falls underneath that.
Agreed.
It's clearly the umbrella, and you need to understand the person. You need to connect with the person. So, just again, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but kudos to you for what you do and how you do it. But I think also very important is the fact that you've been able to find a way to do that in a quasi pay to play model. So we had Skip Gilbert, the CEO of USU Soccer, 2.5 million players strong, the largest affiliate of U.S. Soccer Federation, coming on here and effectively admitting that the pay-to-play model is a little broken and needs some work. But even I have my pendulum was somewhat swung back a little bit more towards the middle, saying, we're not going to get rid of pay-to-play. Pay-to-play serves a purpose, right? We've got to pay for coaches. We've got to pay for fields. We've got to pay for stuff. Unfortunately, we're paying for way too big of fields and way too big of sports centers. I mean, why do kids 8 years old need to play in a $30 million sports facility? I don't know. That's for another day. But it does play into did pay to play just bastardize the whole system? Well, you're in there. How have you reconciled that sort of emotionally and mentally, such that you've created this model and FSQ that you have, and use that also as a platform to tell us a little bit more specific about what FSQ was about when you started it?
Yeah. Okay. So first, the pay to play in the academies, I've seen a lot of angles of it, as you have you. So. And when community centers argue to me or complain about the academy that now has taken and diluted the talent pool and done that in their community, I say, well, that tells me that you were doing a shitty job. You were not adhering, excuse the language, you are not listening to your consumers. Because if you were listening to consumers and providing them with the things that they were wanted, they wouldn't be leaving for somewhere else. The academy is a group of people that have seen a gap in the system, and there is a gap in the system, have probably banged their heads against the concrete wall 1,000 times trying to change it, and then said, you know what, we're just going to go do it over here. And unfortunately for them, with that investment that they've put into doing it over here, comes increase in fees, and now you have to train all year round. I'd like to see those academies share. Like instead of having a soccer academy and a basketball academy and another academy, why don't those academies mix and mingle so that they're at least doing different sports? Because we already know the benefits of that on the consumer. I don't think we're there yet. I think we'll probably get there. But I think the local community organizations, the money's there. If parents are leaving to do it somewhere else, that means they had the money. I think paid coaching is something that needs to be evaluated, but only if you're actually going to hold people accountable to standards, only if it's the right people. If you're just going to pay coaches for the sake of paying coaches, don't bother. Culture is king and queen. You have to start with that. And that's what we're learning, a good segue into FSQ, which is, status quo. That's what that means. Outward facing name, forget status quo, but you know what the real one is. So basically we came in and just said, okay, listen, we're willing to work with any sport organization who wants to get away from status quo. And what we found is across the board, pretty consistently, you've got volunteer boards. Some have experience. Most don't have experience in business. They've got time, but they don't have business experience. And you're running a business. I don't care if it's a not-for-profit or for-profit. And we tell this to people all the time. Anytime there is an exchange of cash for a service, you are in a business. So you need to know how to run the business. And the first thing we need to do is an environmental scan. How are we doing? We don't ask our consumers how we're doing. We don't connect with our consumers around what do they want from the experience. And then we don't use that to guide our strategic plan. So what we found is a lot of people came, if they did a strategic plan that was more than just checking the box, that strategic plan was internally focused on what whoever was the head wanted, with very little input or support from members, coaches, or any of the other stakeholders. Doesn't work. No one likes to be told what to do. And a dictatorship and an autocracy in 2022, they don't, unless you're really, really good. And then number two, after we got that strategic plan, which we always use as a tactical kind of 1 year, why do a 5 year? You're not even going to be here once your kid finishes their cycle. We go into marketing and communications. So how do we communicate that message internally? And how do we communicate that message externally? If you don't have that skill, you don't know what to do. It's not just social media and putting up scores and doing that thing. You need to be intentional about our message, our culture, our mission, vision, values. Are we living the values of the organization at the highest level, or are we taking shortcuts? Because nothing erodes, trust faster than looking around and seeing that whoever is above you is taking a shortcut or, doing something untoward or whatever happens. So, and in a business with no accountability, it happens all the time. It's not hard to see why we're in the problem that we're in. It's also not hard to stand out now and be a great organization. It really isn't, because we've gotten so far, that pendulum, like you said, has swung so far to the other side that now if we're going to decide to get the right people on board, create a great culture, engage all the stakeholders in that process, make sure that we're communicating it, and most importantly, hold people accountable to what it is that we want and the vision for this organization, academy, community, doesn't matter. We're going to succeed. It takes work though. It takes work, it takes support. And what we do is we support organizations in doing that. We don't try to make it about us. We don't want to steal anyone's job. We are there to support the executive director, the technical director, the president, the marketing and communications person. And every time someone comes to us and says, well, this is a problem, we use our virtual bench, because there's tons of people that are doing good and great things in sport in Canada and the US and globally. We use our virtual bench to solve the problems. So we don't try to control it. We don't try to own it as an organization. We're not trying to charge people an exorbitant fee. We legitimately want to see sport better because of the reasons that the three of us know that sport should be an important pillar of everyone's life.
So who then is your primary targeted customer base? Would that be clubs and academies and so most of the pay-to-play organizations?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. So we have worked with everyone from the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, presented to the Norwegian Olympic Committee after they won the Olympics for all intents and purposes, right down to the local mom and pop run club. What we're seeing is the consistencies and commonalities are all there. It's different levels, obviously. More people to manage the higher you go. More difficult in some cases the higher you go. Difficult because you're only a onesie twosie and you don't have the bandwidth off the side of your desk to do a lot of those things. So in Canada, we work a lot with local, provincial, and national sport organizations. The ready ones. There's some that have, we got it. Nope, we got this. Despite their numbers nosediving, we can't force people. We work with people that are ready. We don't care if it's a mom and pop or it's a National Olympic Committee.
But unfortunately, that's too few of them right now. But I like your approach because what you're doing is you're attacking the numbers, right? You can't go one-on-one in this. We'll spend too many lifetimes trying to go one-on-one on this. And as we know, and there's sort of an undercurrent to a lot of what we talked about, is you can't tell someone how to parent, but you can show that, through numbers, there's a different way, just like in coaching, right? So the model coaching you have is successful, not necessarily that, you're always going to win a championship, but certainly it makes a difference. And I'm reminded of I coached a mom's team of softball, and most of them didn't play softball. And we were in last place. We'd not won a single game. But we had such an incredibly powerful group of moms that were playing against 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds and 21-year-olds. And the very last game of the season we won, everybody wanted to be on our team. We were 1-19 or something, and they all wanted to be on our team because we, not just because we were having fun and handing out cookies, and the name of the team was Carol's Cookies, but it was because we were improving, we were being challenged, we were working hard, and everyone saw that and saw that we were having a good time doing it. Whereas these other teams, they weren't having so much fun.
Right.
So, there's definitely a way to do it right, and we've seen people do great things, but we got to go after the numbers. And that's what we're doing also at Metal Sports, and that we're seeing the more street soccer courts we get down, the bigger the reach. Just more and more people coming and playing unstructured, communal, drop in, free pickup play. And it's great for the kids. It's great for the adults, and we're trying to find a way to spread that big, not just one pitch at a time. It's let's roll it out through an entire city like we did last summer in Chicago. So, and then you see real change. So that's our hope as well. And it looks like that's your model is let's get to the numbers. Let's get to the, move the meter for a large number of kids in a club, even, the Paralympics or other organization. And let's get everyone then to sort of revision this. And as a metaphor, I'll say Todd Bean, son-in-law of the great Johan Cruyff, one of the greatest footballers of all time, coached a session of 14-year-old boys. It was an hour-long session. He spoke for 5 minutes. And that was it. And these kids learned. You could tell. You just watched in amazement because they were learning. And it was just 5 minutes of stuff that he would throw out there at them and then let them take ownership of the rest. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that's a lot of what you're doing. You're finding a way to give ownership. You're not coming in and saying, we're going to manage it and we're going to do it. You're helping people with their ownership of what they have. And in turn, then turning that into something great for, that feels good for them as well as the kids and adults that they're serving.
Absolutely. The saying goes, no laps, no lines, no lectures.
Love it. Well, we can go on and on, Matt, and I trust you and I will when this call's over. I'm coming up and we're going to get a beer and we're going to just keep going with this. So, it's great stuff that you're doing. I'm thoroughly impressed. And hey, folks, go to Matt Young's LinkedIn page and you'll see the 50 or 60 entries of just amazing things that Matt has lived, not just done, but lived. As part of becoming the great mentor and coach that he is. And then, of course, we'll put the link to the TED Talk in as well. Matt, just super pleasure to have you here. And thank you so much for sharing this with us. And I'm just thoroughly impressed with what you're doing, man. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the platform and the opportunity to share. Really appreciate it.
All right, that's a wrap. Thanks to our guest, Matt Young. Wow, impressive stuff he's doing. Definitely check him out. FSQ is his company that he founded, at Matt Young 101 on Twitter. Check his LinkedIn page out. Very impressive list of things that he has experienced and lived and shares in his coaching and his mentoring. Hey, thanks for all the likes. Thanks for all the follows. We love the attention, of course. Send us your questions. We've got links down below, even links to Matt's TED Talk. And until next time, play on.